सालों में जो तैयार की, उसके लिए एक कड़ी धुरी हमारे माननीय मुख्यमंत्री जी ने उत्तर प्रदेश से पिछले 6 सालों से एक तेजी से इसको बढ़ता हुआ उत्तर प्रदेश, और हर क्षेत्र में मैंने कहा ऐसा नहीं कि केवल इंडस्ट्री के बारे में, हमारा कृषि क्षेत्र भी उतना ही विकसित हो रहा है, लेकिन कृषि क्षेत्र से लोग अब आकर के स्किल होंगे, स्किल होकर के यहाँ पे कंज्यूम होंगे। वहां पे जो अंडर एम्प्लॉयमेंट था, वो अंडर एम्प्लॉयमेंट खत्म होकर वहां पे लोग प्रॉपरली जितनी जरूरत है उतने लोग होंगे, और धीरे धीरे आकर के हमारी इंडस्ट्री, जब हमारा एक मैन्युफैक्चरिंग हब उत्तर प्रदेश बनेगा, तो मैन्युफैक्चरिंग हब में हमारे गांव और शहर एक दूसरे के समन्वय से काम करेंगे। वहां का उत्पाद यहाँ पे कंज्यूम होगा, वहां पे वो उत्पाद होगा जो यहाँ पे कंज्यूम हो सकता है, यहाँ की चीजें वहां से जुड़ेगी। ये सारा का सारा, ताकि वो उत्तर प्रदेश एक नया उत्तर प्रदेश होगा, और वो नया उत्तर प्रदेश विकसित, जैसे देश विकसित हो रहा है वैसे हमारा उत्तर प्रदेश विकसित होने के लिए आगे बढ़ रहा है। इसीलिए एक एक्सरसाइज हमने चालू की, कानपुर है 2047, लखनऊ है 2047। इस प्रकार की एक्सरसाइज कि हर कोई सोचे कि जब 2047 में जब भारत विकसित होगा तो हमारा प्रदेश कैसा होगा, हमारा जो है शहर कैसा होगा, हमारा गांव कैसा होगा। हर एक को इसके बारे में सोचेगा, तो सोचने से उसको पूरा करने की पूरी कोशिश करेगा। तो ये एक हमारा टीम इंडिया जैसे बात करते हैं माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी, ये टीम उत्तर प्रदेश जिसमें आप सारे लोग हैं, और आप सबको माहौल खड़ा करना है कि जो एक कल्पना लेकर के चलने, एक विकसित उत्तर प्रदेश 2047 तक, एक बहुत सशक्त अर्थव्यवस्था 2047 तक लेकर चलने की व्यवस्था कर रहे हैं, और जिसका पहला लक्ष्य है अगले 5 साल में हमको $1 ट्रिलियन इकोनॉमी करने के लिए। उसके लिए पूरी की पूरी कोशिश जो ये आज उत्तर प्रदेश में माननीय मुख्यमंत्री जी के नेतृत्व में आज जो काम कर रहा है, उस काम के लिए जो आज आप लोग चर्चा करेंगे, मैं समझता हूँ बहुत उपयोगी चर्चा होगी। आपने कई सारी बातें बताई, मैंने उसको नोट किया, मैंने उसे नोट किया कि क्या क्या चीज़ हम लोग कर सकते हैं, कैसे हम लोग कर सकते हैं। ये बात आप निश्चित मान कर चलिए कि आज उत्तर प्रदेश की ब्यूरोक्रेसी, उत्तर प्रदेश के जो सिविल सर्वेंट्स हैं, वो पूरी तरीके से माननीय मुख्यमंत्री जी के जो नेतृत्व में जिस प्रकार से तेजी से आगे बढ़ रहे हैं, उसे लेकर के बढ़ाना चाहते हैं। आज आपको जानकर के खुशी होगी, पिछले 6 महीने के भीतर 22 नए विश्वविद्यालयों के लिए LOI जारी किए गए। 5 का तो LOP भी जारी हो गया, उनका जो काम चालू हो गया, अभी इस सेशन से एडमिशन करना चालू करेंगे। इस तेजी से काम हो रहा है उत्तर प्रदेश में, और वो हर क्षेत्र में हो रहा। मैंने आपको उदाहरण दिया, 1 डिस्ट्रिक्ट 1 मेडिकल कॉलेज, हर डिस्ट्रिक्ट में मेडिकल कॉलेज है। हमारे खाली 6 जिले रह गए जिनके बारे में भारत सरकार में हमारी अर्जी लगी हुई है, जिसको मैं लगातार फॉलो कर रहा हूं। हमारे हर डिवीजन हेडक्वार्टर पे यूनिवर्सिटीज बने, हम स्किलिंग के बारे हर तरीके से बने, एक ऑलराउंड एफर्ट कि हमारा उत्तर प्रदेश एक विकसित उत्तर प्रदेश में, उसके लिए कोशिश हो रही है। और उसके लिए मैं CIA को धन्यवाद दूंगा, और हमारे माननीय मंत्री जी यहाँ पे आ गए, माननीय मंत्री जी को मैं स्वागत भी करता हूँ, अभिनंदन करता हूँ। और मुझे अब भागना होगा, बिकॉज 11 बजे हमारी एक माननीय मुख्यमंत्री जी की बैठक, उसे मुझे पहुंचना है। तो मैं आपके आगे की चर्चा के लिए आप सबको शुभकामनाएं भी देता हूं, अपने तरफ से धन्यवाद भी देता हूं CII को कि आप एक अच्छा पहल किए हुए। और जब भी आपको कुछ नई आइडिया है, प्लीज टेक टाइम फ्रॉम मी, आई एम ऑलवेज ओपन टू ऑल काइंड्स ऑफ गुड आइडियाज, एंड दैट इज न्यू उत्तर प्रदेश। आई एम ऑलवेज रेडी टू लर्न फ्रॉम यू एंड सी व्हाट वी कैन डू फॉर द बेस्ट फॉर माई स्टेट। ये अपने राज्य के लिए जो भी हम बेहतर से बेहतर कर सकते हैं, आपसे सीख करके हमारे लिए अच्छा होगा। आज के डिलीब्रेशन में भी जो नई बातें आए, जरूर आप उसको मुझसे शेयर करिएगा अलग से टाइम लेकर के। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद, आप सबको बहुत बहुत अभिनंदन, धन्यवाद, जय हिंद।
तो आप लोग ने सबने सुना किस प्रकार हमारे जो मुख्य सचिव थे, उन्होंने उत्तर प्रदेश में जो सब बदलाव आ रहा है उसके बारे में कुछ चीज़ें शेयर की। इट इज़ अ प्लेजर फॉर अस to welcome Shri A.K. Sharma ji, the Honorable Minister for Urban Development and Energy. In fact, Sharma ji, I must tell you, is one of the most dynamic bureaucrats of the Gujarat cadre. In fact, CII इनके साथ बहुत दशकों से काम कर रहा है इनके साथ. From the time when I believe the first investor summit was set up in Gujarat, Vibrant Gujarat Summit, वो इन्हीं के नेतृत्व में चालू हुआ था और आज ये उत्तर प्रदेश को एक तरह से इनके विभाग में बदल रहे हैं. So without saying much more, sir, I invite you to please share your thoughts.
How much time do we have? How much time do we have? Okay. Very good morning to all of you. Friends, you have heard our Chief Secretary talking, and as he said, I am also witnessing the same change which is happening in UP, and we are definitely on the right path of development. Since you have selected the topic of making $1 trillion economy, I'll focus myself on that only. Before we talk of UP's 1 trillion, we have to perhaps touch upon the 5 trillion target of our Honorable Prime Minister. And I have been part of that thinking also. I was working with Honorable Prime Minister, so I very closely seen those deliberations, those anxieties also, how do we reach to this target. I must say that to achieve anything big, first of all, you have to believe in yourself. We have to believe that it is achievable. We have to believe that it is doable. When Prime Minister talks about making India a $5 trillion economy in just few years, when Prime Minister talks about making India a developed country by 2047, when we celebrate our 100th year of independence, we have to, first of all, make ourselves believe into those thoughts and into those predictions and roadmaps. And all this, making a $5 trillion economy or making India a developed country by 2047, or for that matter, making UP a $1 trillion economy in next few years, it's all doable, my friends. I personally believe that if we all tighten our belts, if we all commit ourselves to this noble target, it can be achieved. Why I am saying it? There are various reasons, but I'll start with a historical reason. You must have heard India being a सोने की चिड़िया. सोने की चिड़िया सब तो सुना होगा, सबने सुना होगा. जहाँ डाल डाल पे बैठी थी सोने की चिड़िया, कैसे एक गीत भी है. It was actually a सोने की चिड़िया. You must, you all of you have mobile phones in your hand. You can type. There is a British economist called Angus Madison, Angus Madison, Angus Madison on Indian economy. You can type and find what he says. He is a British economist. We, our forefathers, and many of us, particularly in those who have pride in India's past, particularly those in BJP and the Vichar Parivar, we all believe that, they all say that 5,000 years ago, India used to be world's largest economy, and it used to contribute around 25% of the global GDP. India's share in global GDP used to be around 25%, which is 1/4 of the global economy. Now, I have no documentary proof for that. So many of you can question that. How is Mr. Sharma saying that? Or how those who are talking about Sone ki Chidiya, how can they prove? Because the young generation needs proof.
That is why I said, please type Angus medicine on Indian economy on your mobile and see what he says. I have saved, while coming on the way I was trying to save in my mobile. If you have found that page, I'll be happy. He says, the Google says, I could not go into more details of his work, but Google says, perhaps Wikipedia, it says, according to British economist Angus Madison, India's share of the world economy went from 24.4% in 1700 AD to 4.2% in 1950. Could you find it? मिल गया आप लोगों को? This is where we were. So 5,000 years, you forget, 1700 AD, 1700, this British economist says that India's share in the world economy was 24.4%. Where did we go wrong? We were already world's largest economy. We were already a developed country at that time. And I can give you the reasons why we were so. First reason is that mostly in those days, olden days, the economy used to be basically primarily an agrarian economy. We were a huge land mass with lot of agricultural strength, perennial rivers, 3-4 seasons to grow various crops and all that. So obviously our share in the world economy was very high. The same economist says two things went wrong in India. One, when the whole world industrialized, when the whole world was industrial, he also says that India's economy has declined during the Mughal period and particularly during the British period. And the reasons are very obvious, because they were not here to develop India. They were here to loot India, to plunder and to take away the resources which India used to have. British particularly did this. They took our raw material and they fed their industrial revolution in the West, in the Britain. And India's decline started during those time after 1800. The same economist says that India not only did not catch up on industrialization, it went through a process of deindustrialization. He uses the word deindustrialization if you read his works. And this is also very understandable. Why did Gandhiji want to block Swadeshi, to block foreign goods? Why did he launch a movement of Swadeshi? Why did he attach so much importance to charkha? Charkha, a small instrument. He wanted that we, instead of buying and using foreign goods coming from British lands and who have actually fed their industrial revolution with our resources, our cotton, our raw material, our minerals. Why should we help them in progressing, and why should we help them in making economic growth? So that was the philosophy behind Gandhi and many of our freedom fighters launching a movement for Swadeshi. So this is how our share has declined. 1700, 24.4%, and 1950 when we became independent, it was around 4% as the economist says. And since then, perhaps we are hovering around the same figure. We could not catch up. Now, again, if I just to give you confidence on what I'm saying, in India, in those days, or in olden days when we were children, many of you must be belonging to rural areas. I have seen two things working in villages. With my own eyes, I have seen. One is the earliest examples of mechanization in our system, in our economy, in our society was there used to be an instrument or a system called rahat. आप लोगों ने सुना है? किसी ने रहट सुना है? आपने कितने ने सुना है? Rahat, to fetch water from a well. It was powered by animal power, But there was a lot of mechanics involved into this. The bucket lined up in a chain will go deep into the well, then the bucket will fill, it will turn, and it will come like this, and then again it will turn and pour water into whatever you have put there. That was an example of mechanization in India. The second example I have seen with my own eyes was kolhu. Kolhu jo tel nikalne ke liye for taking out oil from the oil seeds. Kolhu aapne dekha hoga. Similarly, in those days, animal power was used for crushing even sugar cane. वो भी आपने देखा होगा. So all these were what? They were mechanical inventions in our society. And not today, thousands and thousands of years back. But unfortunately, since we are in the wrong hands at the time of transition, when the whole world went through a process of industrial revolution, when the whole world went through a process of industrialization, we were kept behind deliberately so that we could not catch up with the rest of the world. Or else, so you can argue even on this line that we were kept behind in the industrial revolution process so that our raw materials can be taken away to be used in the process of industrialization in the Western world. So this is where we could not catch up. We could not catch up with the fast mechanization, with the fast pace of modernization, which the whole world has done. And that is where our economy rested. Even today, we have not been able to achieve our own place in the global economy, which was 24-25%. So first of all, we have to believe that we have been a rich country. First of all, we have to believe that, and particularly the northern India, it must have been including, say, UP. Northern India, with its all-season rivers, with its many agricultural seasons and agroclimatic zones, where you can grow any crop you whether it's vegetable, whether it's horticulture, whether it's food grains, anything which is eatable by human beings, it can be produced in, say, northern India, including the Uttar Pradesh. So obviously, the northern India or Uttar Pradesh was also a prime part of Indian economy, which used to have a prime place in the global economy. But we have fallen down. Now we have to reach there. We have to perhaps again make our place in the economy. And it's possible, friends. It's possible. In our language, people from BJP, in our language, it is mumkin. और खास करके जब मोदी है तो और भी मुमकिन है. So go from here with this belief that India can become a developed country. India can become a 5 trillion, not only 5 trillion, but $10 trillion economy in very next few years. Similarly, UP can also become a $1 trillion economy in just few years. We have to reorganize ourselves. We have to rethink ourselves. For example, if we, in India, if we just do very simple things which our forefathers have taught us, the GDP of India can perhaps add many points into its growth. For example, if we start just saving water, will the GDP not be benefited? Yes or no? If we adopt, say, micro-irrigation, instead of floating water all around for irrigating the fields, which the West did during this time, during these 300-400 years, which the West has done, they have started using micro-irrigation techniques. Who is stopping us? And they are not very advanced science. They are very rudimentary things. If we start saving energy, if we start saving water, if we start taking care of the garbage which we throw out of our home. I am urban development minister. I know how difficult or how time-taking is the process of cleaning a city, keeping a city clean. Today, you might be witnessing a little different Lucknow, but I know how difficult it has been to come up to this level. It's still lot of way has to be gone. So if we just decide that we will not throw garbage out of our home just like that, we will separate it, green and plastic and wet and dry and all that जो हम बता रहे हैं. So how will it benefit the economy? I will have to employ lesser people. My roads will be clean, hygiene will be better, people will not fall sick. All this adds to the GDP. Does it not add? It adds. So we have to start from very basics. I'm not here to teach you because you know it, you know the economy and the industry and the other things much better than I know. What we have to start with, if we have to achieve a $1 trillion economy in UP, if we have to achieve $5 trillion economy in India, if we want to make a resilient economy, if we want India to become a developed country by 2047, in just 24-25 years, we have to first of all change our own habits. We have to save water, we have to save electricity, because electricity saved is actually electricity generated. Thirdly, can we not use natural energy for powering and for energizing many things in our life? Did India not have buildings, today's green buildings, fashionable green buildings? Actually, in India, even in this Lucknow itself, you can go, there are many heritage buildings in Lucknow which were actually so well designed that they always used to be air conditioned. You never felt heat into them. So was this not an invention? All this is possible. So India has to first learn where our needs can be met without using any electricity, without using any power, without wasting any power, rather. How can we live our lives with that? And even there, India has been a pioneer. Indian lifestyle has been based on using the natural resources and using the wisdom which our forefathers have given for living with nature, and then using the same for betterment of our lives. Now coming to the modern ways of development, which was perhaps presented also in the morning. We have to do a lot more than that, obviously. What I'm saying that we have to start with the basics, but obviously we have to go much further. And for that, as you might have heard, that many things, Chief Secretary also talked, many things are happening in India, many things are happening in UP also. Who had ever thought in India that we were 142nd rank in ease of doing business when Prime Minister Modi took over as Prime Minister? In 2014, I have been a witness of that situation. We worked on that very hard. Our rank in 2014 in global ranking of ease of doing business, which is done annually by World Bank, was 142nd. Today, with lot of hard work by Honorable Prime Minister and his team, we are 63rd, somewhere in 60s, early 60s. So who had thought that we can make this progress? Who had thought that India would be a one taxation system country? Every municipality had its own system. Every naka, every road had its own. There was a naka which could stop you for collection of money. Sometimes valid, sometimes invalid people also used to run it. Legitimate and illegitimate. Both kinds of nakas which used to stop you, waste your energy, waste your time, and also exploit at many. Who had thought that we will have a one nation, one taxation system, one GST? Day before yesterday, I was sitting somewhere, and some forest officer was talking to me. He used the word, same pass will be valid for the entire country. I asked him, what is that? even being a bureaucrat, I was curious to know that. He said, sir, for the first time in India's history, what we have done, UP, suppose you cut any tree, you cut any timber, you know how difficult it is to transport timber, because everywhere the forest people will, forest or police can harass you, and the punishment is very strong on that for cutting a protected say forest or protected tree. He said, and every step, like a vehicle, a policeman can stop you anywhere, RTO can stop you anywhere. He said, this timber which was cut, and secondly, why will you grow timber if you cannot cut it? So it is both ways not very healthy to stop it, but it was being stopped by every officer possible. He said, with intervention of our Honorable Prime Minister, now we have one nation, one forest pass. Not only in UP, not only a district of UP you can travel with your timber. It can pass through any state of the country, and no police officer is supposed to ask about that. So, who had thought about this? This simplification of business, this ease of doing business, we had never imagined. When I joined the IAS in 1988, we have been struggling with all this, how to make things simple. Who had thought that your income tax refund will come in just like this? All this has happened in this country. So you can, another confidence which I want to give, that further simplification, further ease of doing business is on the way. Till Prime Minister Modi is there on the chair, I have full confidence in his vision, in his style of work, that further simplification of business is going to come in India. This is the time to do business in India. And I have been telling a lot of my friends, please don't think of going anywhere outside the country. Our country is becoming better day by day. We have to make it better day by day instead of going abroad. Please find a state, please find a place for yourself, work with the state government, work with the local administration, and they are definitely much better systems, much better people are on the chair who will help you in doing business. So this is the second thing. First, we have to believe in our past. Second, we have to believe in our present. That our present has become much better than it was earlier. And Mr. Modi is there, Mr. Chief Minister or Honorable Chief Minister, Mr. Yogi is there, whose ambition in life, whose vision for life is that they want to see a better India. Mr. Yogi wants to see a better UP with his own eyes. So this is the second confidence which I wanted to give. The third thing is that in the month of February, this very UP, as Chief Secretary also would have said, we signed close to 20,000 memorandums of understanding for investment in various sectors of UP, various districts of UP. Close to 33.5 lakh crores of rupees were promised to be invested. None of us, to be very honest, being a minister also of two important departments, even I had not imagined, envisaged that so much investment will pour in UP. But things have changed, the environment has changed, UP is changing, and as you might be saying also, if UP can change, India can change. We all know that, because UP was the most perhaps difficult nut to crack in India. And if UP can show this way, that we, and in 2 days of summit, Global Investor Summit, we signed 20,000 MOUs worth 33.5 lakh crore rupees, and CII was a partner into that. So no one is lying. It was all transparently available. You can check, you can verify. So if this can happen in UP, many more things can happen in UP also. These investments are coming in various districts, in various sectors, including, say, my own sector, renewable energy. I am since Minister of Energy also. We had just talked to a few investors in the RE sector, renewable energy sector. Please come, have a look at UP. Though our solar radiation is not very good, but please come, we will facilitate you in making investments. And you know, for your information, renewable energy sector was the highest in terms of any one sector attracting the investments in the Global Investor Summit. With little intervention, little interest which we were able to generate among the investors. So this is how things are changing. You might be aware also that Southeast Asia, after many companies and many countries burned their fingers in, say, China, many of their companies, they wanted and they are still wanting to withdraw. They are still wanting to find alternative locations. Then the immediate thing which perhaps comes in their mind is the Southeast Asia. It could be Vietnam, it could be Malaysia, it could be Singapore, or any of those nearby countries of China. But even there, they are saturated. I can tell you, I have visited many of those countries, and I can say they have no space. They are so tiny, they are so small. How can they accommodate all industries or major industries coming out of China? China being such a huge country, huge investments. So it is India's turn, it is India's time. And I would also request you, this is the fourth thing which I wanted to tell you, that each one of us, like I am talking about India, like I am talking about UP, each one of you has to become ambassador of India. Each one of you has to become ambassador of UP. We don't have to lie, we have to just put plain facts on the table. That see, India was an industrialized country, India was a big economy, India was a thriving economy. UP was a thriving economic belt of India in those days. Please come here, we are here to help you. All sectors, we have signed MOUs, as Chief Secretary was saying, we are very rigorously monitoring them. We are very keen and committed that those investments are grounded on the ground. We are not leaving any stone unturned in making them fructify in much less time than expected. In the next few years, I can see UP to be perhaps the best state in India in terms of not only economic growth, but also in terms of social life, cultural life. Why I am saying this, I will explain to you. See, UP again is a place or a state which was characterized by two things. One is strong cultural heritage. Maybe whatever India is known for, whatever culturally India stands for, whatever culturally India is identified for, it is housed in UP, my friends. Whether it is legacy of Ram, Ayodhya is here. Whether it is legacy of Krishna, Mathura Vrindavan is here. Whether it is legacy of Shiva, Kashi, and many other places. So whatever India is known for, it starts, it originates, it emanates from UP. You can very safely and confidently say that. The second reason is that UP is a vast landscape. Had UP been a country, it would have been the fifth largest country in terms of population. Today, with its population, we are the fifth largest land mass in the entire world. So we have a huge market. We have a huge consumption market. We have a huge consumer market. And any producer, any industry looks for all these things. Thirdly, when we have the fifth largest manpower, when we have the fifth largest population of the world housed in UP, obviously we have more hands to work also, good hands to work also, talented people to work also. So in terms of availability of manpower, in terms of availability of hard-working manpower, skilled manpower, skilling has to be done. We have to skill our people. We have to teach them how to stand, how to talk, how to speak English, how to behave in an industrial environment, in an economic environment, and that is doable. We all have learned. I have myself studied in a village primary school, and I have come with God's grace all this way. So we have to train them, we have to prepare them to face the world, and that is doable. But the manpower is hard-working manpower who can stand on the floor mill, who can stand on the factory this thing, workplace for 18 hours, 20 hours at a stretch. You will not find such a hardworking population anywhere in the world. Not only in India, I'm talking of anywhere in the world. Southeast Asians used to be hardworking, but even their habits have been spoiled by now due to drinking and many other things. So this is our second strength. The third strength is that, as I said earlier, we have now realized UP has for the first time in the biggest contribution of Honorable Chief Minister Yogi ji for UP is, there are many contributions, but the two biggest contributions is, one is controlling the law and order situation, which is the starting place for attracting investments. And the second cultural shift, second paradigm shift he has brought is thinking of UP that industrialization, or say, see, when we were studying in the university, I am a product of Allahabad University, we had many communist friends, or say students with communist bent of mind. And what they used to do, they used to roam around in the university here and there, and they used to make people feel pride in poverty. गरीबी है तो कम्युनिज्म है तो उनकी चलती है, उनका झोला बस्तर चलता है. For the first time in UP, the Chief Minister and his team, including me, we have been trying to create a culture, create a belief, create a thinking that wealth generation, wealth creation is an important thing if you want your society to live properly and if you want the society to progress. Wealth generation was a stigma. Any wealthy person, he used to be looked at with contempt. ये तो चोर होगा, टैक्स चोरी किया होगा, ये चोरी किया होगा, वो चोरी किया होगा. Now that thinking is changing. I can see with my own eyes that thinking is changing. The third problem was, and that is also changing, that including myself, I'm not talking about others, including myself, we used to prefer government jobs rather than, there are many people, I had many relatives when I was working in IAS, they used to come to me and say, भैया हमारे बेटे का जरा नौकरी का देख लो. Obviously that is a very genuine request, no problem. Then very silently कान में बोलते थे, कुछ खर्चा होगा तो हम कर देंगे. So many times I used to ask them कि कहाँ से लाओगे खर्चा? हमें तो जरूरत नहीं है, लेकिन कहीं आप जब चले हो मार्केट में इस तरह की बात करने तो कहाँ से लाओगे? Since they were relatives, so freely I used to ask them. तो बोले खेत अपना बेच देंगे, थोड़ा लड़के का लग जाए. लड़के का कैसा नौकरी लगवाना चाहते थे? That also I will tell you. They wanted a चपरासी की नौकरी, they wanted a clerk की नौकरी किसी स्कूल में, किसी RTO ऑफिस में. For making his son, his brother, his sister, his daughter a clerk or a peon in any government establishment, they were ready to sell their hard-earned, traditional, ancestral property, either house or farm. So many times I used to wonder and I used to tell them कि अच्छा ठीक है, अब खेत बेचने से आपको कितना मिलेगा? तो 5 लाख तो मिल जाएगा. So up to 5 lakhs they were ready to give for a petty job of चपरासी, जिसको कभी भी मैनेजमेंट निकाल देता है स्कूल में भर्ती होने के बाद. And at that time, I'm talking 20 years back, at that time I used to tell them कि भैया वो 5 लाख रुपए से आप उसको एक दुकान खुलवा दो ना, एक पान की दुकान खुलवा दो, मिठाई की दुकान खुलवा दो, हलवाई की दुकान खुलवा दो, सिलाई की दुकान खुलवा दो. नहीं, दिस एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप, उद्यमशीलता जिसको बोलते हैं, that was not available in UP. For the first time, Mr. Yogi has shown, his team has shown that there is entrepreneurship in UP. You will not believe, many of you might have participated in the Global Investor Summit. It was almost full of young people who were wanting to do this startup, this waste to energy product, that biofuel product, that health aggregation app. Many ideas and many ventures, many startups I have seen with my own eyes. So this is another shift which is happening in UP. And therefore, friends, with this shift taking in UP, law and order being controlled, encouragement for investment, looking at the investors with right approach, talking to them in right language, encouraging entrepreneurship, all this change which is happening in UP, I am very sure that $1 trillion economy is not a very difficult target. It's not very far. It's not a difficult target. We are already at close to 300 billion. So 3 times, perhaps we have to increase our pace of development. Obviously, we have to, as I said, we have to reduce our wastages. We have to encourage the investments. We have to encourage the investors. We have to view them with right approach, with right eye, and we have to encourage particularly our young generation who can foray, who can start projects and units in many fields. And particularly where we are going wrong, particularly say the crop residue which is being burnt and polluting the environment also. Many startups, they are coming in waste to energy. Many startups, they are coming to, in my own sector, urban sector, I have seen many projects being signed for recycling of urban waste, recycling of plastic, recycling of this and that. So all this, I'm very sure, will lead us to making a very strong economy in UP, and obviously that will contribute in making India a stronger economy. Another thing which I would mention and then close my talk is that first thing I said, you should not go abroad. Be in India. India, this is India's time. This is UP's time. The second thing, we have to also think what can be prevented from being imported in the country. I remember 2014 when Honorable Modi ji took over as Prime Minister. I was also appointed as Joint Secretary in Prime Minister's office. So under his instructions, we started taking review of what all is being imported in the country. And you will be surprised to know, when we looked at the Defense Ministry, many ministries we looked at, but I would talk about defense. Defense industry, they were importing close to 1,000 items. I'm not talking of Gola Barood and missiles and this thing. I'm talking about thousands of small items, like the dress for the army men, Sena ki Vardi, like the boot, the shoes of our soldiers, like the goggles, night vision, day vision, whatever. Many small things also were being imported. Around 300 such items out of those 1,000 items, we identified and we put our foot down. You might be aware, many of you, CII can certify that. We de-license, it is called de-licensing. Otherwise, Sena used to license those products and this country se, us country se mangana hai. We said no, it is no longer a defense item. We are hereby de-licensing it from being a defense item. It can be produced by anyone, and the Sena has to shortlist from the best producer in the country and buy it. So this is how we encourage, we stop imports, and we encouraged, just now I was in Agra. I am also in charge minister of Agra district. So I was talking to many leather manufacturers, leather industry people in Agra. They did certify, they did say that, sir, what you did during those days is benefiting us. Now we are supplying shoes to the army in India. So this is how import has to be minimized, import has to be reduced. The second thing, this is just an example, army is just an example. This must be happening in many other, it could be happening in railways, like the Vande Bharat Express, which Honorable Prime Minister has inaugurated many in the series in last few years. This is a product of the same thought. Why should we only look at fast passenger trains in other countries? Why can't we produce a fast passenger train in India with our own resources, with our own technology, with our own people, and our own engineers, railway engineers, our officers in the railway, our own workshops and the locomotive factories of railways, they have produced, it is entirely indigenously produced fast train in the, of the country, Vande Bharat Express. So similarly, now we have to, and that is very relevant for all of you, we have to look at big things now. Now small things, we have like Corona also. Corona, even mask was not available, ventilators were not available, PPE kits were not available, but it is the same industry which is sitting opposite me, all of you, put together in 6 months, you started producing. Once the call of the nation came, once the call of time came, we started producing. I was part of that process. During that time, I became MSME Secretary of Government of India. I have contributed in that process. We experimented this. You will not believe, this spray bottles of sanitizer. You might have seen the spray machine. It has a lot of components, small components which there is a spring, there is a dhakkan. All that, you will be surprised to know, I am telling a very interesting story. I was made Secretary MSME during the starting of the Corona, April 2020. And I was given a challenge that this spray bottle, it was in huge demand in India. And the supply was very less. So at that time, the bottles, particularly those upper portion of the motor system, it was being imported from China. I called the industry people. They said, sir, there are only 3 industries which make this in India. Some 2 in Haryana and 1 perhaps in Punjab, Patiala or somewhere. There is no 4th industry, there is no 4th unit in India to make this. And I realized that they were in terribly short supply. So obviously we had no choice but to import for some time from China. But then I called the laboratories of MSME ministry, gave them some money, around 20 crores. I asked them to, you go and make the dyes, you go and make the experiments, whatever you need to do, you do it. But I want this machine to be manufactured in India in next 1 month. And you will be surprised to know, you will be happy to know that our own MSMEs, our own laboratories, they came up with a indigenous this machine, and in 6 months we were net exporters of those spray machines. So this is the strength which we have. From that, I would now urge upon you that you look at bigger things. How can we compete with the biggest industries of the world? How can we compete with America? How can we compete with industries of China and Japan? Another example I'll give you. In Gujarat, this Suzuki came, they put a plant in Gujarat with invitation of Honorable Prime Minister when he was Chief Minister. I was working at that time in Gujarat. With my own eyes, I have seen this happening. We facilitated them in setting up their unit in Ahmedabad district. After they were set up, in 1 year, just 1 year, Mr. Suzuki of Japan, who is the owner of Suzuki Industries, he met the Chief Minister and he said that, sir, I want to give you a very good news. He said, we were all surprised. We were already happy that Suzuki is here in Gujarat. We were all very buoyant. He said that, no, there is a bigger news than that. The bigger news was that now I have stopped manufacturing Suzuki cars in Japan. I am exporting the Suzuki made in Gujarat to my own country, which is Japan. And they started exporting Gujarat-made Suzuki cars in various parts of the country. So this is the strength we have. This is the strength in our manpower. This is the strength in our system. So from there, I would urge upon you, in UP 2-3 very interesting things are happening. One is that you might be aware that we are setting up a defense industrial corridor in one of the backward regions, and you should have a look on that. You should invite your partners, foreign partners, to come and put up their units. Now we have to start producing bigger things. We have to, from Vardi and boot and goggle, we have to move to tanks and fighter jets and other bigger items of, say, defense, or bigger items of, say, solar energy. And it is again doable. So you have to look at our defense industrial corridor. The second thing which is interesting in UP is that Mr. Yogi, our Honorable Chief Minister, he has successfully strengthened our infrastructure. Now it is very easy to travel in UP. When we were students, I remember traveling 100 kilometers from Prayag to my own native district, Azamgarh. It used to take full day, 120 kilometers. Now we have a network of expressways, we have network of good roads, and the thing, interesting industrial point of view, the thing which is going to take place is we have planned to set up industrial corridors along those expressways. So you can identify your space as to which expressway, which it could be Purvanchal Expressway, it could be Bundelkhand Expressway. Put up your units, bring your partners and friends to put up their units from foreign countries, from other states. All that is possible. The third interesting thing is taking place, is that there are many untapped or unexplored sectors which are actually very interesting, but no one had paid attention on them. This includes renewable energy also. Lot of good solar radiation is available in Bundelkhand area of UP. Also in certain parts of eastern UP, for example, Mirzapur, lot of good solar radiation is there. We are committed to facilitate those solar energy projects. We have come up with a solar policy as well, and also biofuel projects, they are also possible. So these were very unexplored sectors. Now, as minister and as government, we are trying to promote them. For the first time in UP, we have put focus on the solar energy. We have been actually lagging behind in the sense of the national performance, but now we have decided to catch up. We are setting up green corridors also to evacuate that power from areas like Bundelkhand and Mirzapur. We have also put up in our policy very innovative projects like energy storage projects. You store water and then storage projects, battery storage, all that we have put up in our policy. So this was an unexplored area which is now coming on our radar for being exploration, for being explored and for being developed. Last thing I would like to add is that many of our districts, they are very rich with our traditional skills, with our traditional products, what we call ODOP. That is another big contribution of Honorable Chief Minister Yogi ji in terms of economic contribution. One district, one product. You know that many districts of UP, I can very easily count at least 12 products. Muradabad, brass works, Aligarh, lock works, Firozabad, glass works, Varanasi, silk works. Many of these projects, they are globally recognized and globally respected, globally honored products. But there, what has unfortunately happened, that we have unfortunately not sharpened the skills which those traditional people had. Had we sharpened those skills, had we given them better machines, had we treated their waste with more efficiency, they could have perhaps done better in the global market. So many of you can look at those items as well. Those who are interested in looking at those things, you can contribute, you can make your own business out of that, you can put up your own business out of that, but at least you can facilitate those people earning better. Last thing, with all your support, as I said, we are very committed to make UP industrialize. UP has been an agrarian, basically a society, agrarian state. It was also a rural oriented state. We are trying to fasten the pace of urbanization. We are trying to fasten the pace of industrialization and all possible funds, even the startups. We are very committed and keen to encourage the startups also in various fields, in various sectors. So you are most welcome to UP. Look at the potentials, look at the sectors here, and more so, please convey this message, please convey, be our ambassador, be the ambassador of a UP which has changed. It is not the same UP which you might have heard 10 years, 15 years, 20 years back. It has changed and it is changing very fast. And this is the emerging place. This is the happening place in India. This is the time to be in UP also, because otherwise UP will get crowded. Again, investments. You will not find space, as I was saying, what has happened in Southeast Asia. So this is the transition phase. Take your space, put up your industry, put up your unit in this sector or that sector. All sectors are promising. All sectors have big consumer markets. You can find labor and skilled hands for all possible sectors. I wish you all the best. I'm very thankful that CII invited me this morning to talk to you. And as was said, I fully remember that, in fact, CII has been my teacher in a way. I didn't know any ABCD of industry. When we started the Vibrant Gujarat event in 2001 and 2, I had just come from my field postings of district magistrate, sub-divisional magistrate, rural postings, and then government put me suddenly first in finance department and then industry department. I didn't know anything about industry, but it was CIA, and I must say it was also FICCI, with whom I worked very closely during those days, and then Vibrant Gujarat became a global brand. And in fact, that event is the mother of all such events which are taking place in the entire country. So I wish CII also very well and wish you all good luck, and thank you very much for inviting me and listening to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for taking us towards the great, rich history of our country and also enlightening us about the 17th century when a famous British economist quoted that India is a contributor of 25% of the entire business of the world. Also, thank you, sir, for giving us a reason to believe, as what you said, believe in the past, believe in the present, to have a safe future. And also, I very firmly take your point of being ambassador of our state of Uttar Pradesh, being the ambassador of our country, and also passing this message very strongly to all the people amongst us of not settling in abroad, in fact, come back to India, because India is poised for growth. Sir, we started our journey this year in the state of Uttar Pradesh by one line of translating intent into action, and CII Uttar Pradesh has been lucky to have the patronage of our Honorable Mr. A.K. Sharma ji, Mr. Durga Shankar Mishra ji in all of our CII events. Sir, I would just like to say that if we look at Uttar Pradesh in the map of our country, and if we treat the map as I would say, a human being, so Uttar Pradesh ki jo jagah hai us map mein, it is where the heart is in a human body. So I would say, sir, in few past years, there were some blockages in the arteries, but with your great leadership, with our honorable chief ministers, sir, aapne un arteries mein jo stunts dale hain in the form of airports, in the form of investor summits, in the form of expressways, I'm sure now India has a healthy heart and we can run marathons of 42 kilometers at full speed, sir. I would once again like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to Honorable Minister, sir, for gracing this occasion and sharing his perspectives. I also thank Chief Secretary Sir for joining us today and for his insights into the roadmap for $1 trillion economy for the state. My sincere thanks to Mr. Madhav Singh Hania ji, Deputy Chairman CII Northern Region and Joint Managing Director JK Cement Limited for his constant support and guidance that has been invaluable in making this interaction a success. Also, I would like to thank Mr. Prashant for gracing this occasion all the way from Chandigarh. All the fellow CIA members, non-members, everybody coming from all over the state, I thank all of you. This event has been extremely successful because it not only has participants only from the cities of Lucknow and Kanpur, but today we have participants from all over the state and country. I also thank all the media personals here present, and we eagerly look forward to more such opportunities in the future where our knowledge and strength, along with the government's vision, can work together towards the prosperity and progress of Uttar Pradesh. Thank you, everybody.
I'll give it to him. Don't, not to her. I'll do it.
So again, a very good afternoon to all of you, and thank you for being patient for the next session. We have with us Shri Anant Nageshwaran ji, the Chief Economic Advisor of the Government of India. It's actually really a special privilege to welcome him to deliver the keynote address during this session. Dr. Nageshwaran has the brilliance and far-sightedness of a scholar which blends well with the pragmatism of an administrator. His rich experience in finance and macroeconomic policy puts him at the vanguard of economic policy making. We look forward to hearing his views on the prospects of the country crossing a major milestone to emerge as a $9 trillion economy by 2030. I would also like to extend a very special welcome to Shri Raman Chopra ji, Joint Secretary CBDT, Ministry of Finance. In his 10-year stint in various positions in the ministry, he has discharged a gamut of important roles. He has served as Commissioner, Indian Revenue Services, Income Tax before his current assignment. We also have amongst us Shri Sanjeev Puri ji, President Designate CII and Chairman and Managing Director ITC Limited. I would say Mr. Puri, over his career of 3 decades at ITC and its subsidiaries, has held several business leadership positions and has had the very tough job of transforming ITC from a tobacco company into a very, very well diversified group. Last but not the least, I'd like to welcome Mr. Akash Goenka ji, an entrepreneur from UP and director of Goldie Group. He's also the chairman of CII UP. Founded in 1980, the Goldie Group today boasts of being one of the largest producers of quality spices and food products in India. Mr. Goenka will shed light on how rising entrepreneurial culture in India strengthen its position to leapfrog to a higher growth path. So, sir, we had a session in the morning about how India is poised to become a $5 trillion economy. This was the vision of the Honorable Prime Minister. While he gave a vision to become 5 trillion in 5 years, the pandemic set us maybe back by maybe about a year, I would say. But we're still back on track to do this. The second point is, for India to become a $5 trillion economy, I think it goes without saying that UP will need to become a $1 trillion economy. And we are probably, we were having a discussion with the CEA. I mean, I got a few minutes with him. But what was very interesting to note is that post the pandemic, if there's one situation where we can say we would like to be in, it's probably where we are today, wherein our country is in one of the brightest spots globally by being the fastest growing large nation globally. It's something that's being looked upon in terms of global supply chains, as a manufacturing hub, as a service hub, and a country that's serious to bring in investment, look at free trade agreements, look at ways to create wealth and become one of the top economies globally. I would say it's been a challenging job to balance interest rates while moderating inflation. And the current dispensation is doing that extremely well. We have seen the highest tax collections of GST that we have seen ever over the last few months. So without spending too much time, I would just say that at CII, we are very bullish on the years ahead. And I'm sure you would all be looking forward to hear the views of the Honorable CEA in terms of what he shares with us today. So first I'd like to invite Shri Sanjeev Puri ji to give his welcome remarks, and then we can move forward. Thank you.
Dr. Anant Nageshwaran, Chief Economic Advisor, Government of India. Mr. Raman Chopra, Joint Secretary, CBDT, Ministry of Finance. My colleagues from CII, Mr. Madhav Singhania, Deputy Chairman of CII Northern Region and Joint Managing Director, JK Cements. And Mr. Akash Goenka, Chairman CII UP and Director Goldie Group. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It also gives me immense pleasure to welcome all of you to this very important session where we speak on mission US 9 trillion economy by 2030. And we are extremely fortunate to have amongst us Mr. Nageshwaran, Dr. Nageshwaran, the Chief Economic Advisor, and also Mr. Raman Chopra. And today we are meeting at a point where my colleague also alluded to recently, where India stands out as a beacon of hope and promise in the whole world. We have been not only the fastest growing economy last year, but also the years prior to that, and we are expected to continue to do that, and we are expected to be contributing about 15% to the global growth. And all this is also reflected from the momentum we see. You all have seen the numbers for the last quarter. GDP at 6.1, taking the annual rate of growth to 7.2, ahead of the earlier estimates of 7.0%. That speaks of the robustness of the growth, and all this has not happened by accident. It has definitely happened because of a lot of purposeful and timely interventions and prudent interventions and very astute management of the monetary and fiscal aspects by the government. That's why we are in a very good position today. And we remain optimistic at CII, and all the high frequency indicators are a testament to this. The PMI, as far as manufacturing is concerned, is at a 31-month high. The services piece last month was at a second highest in the last 13 years, second highest because April was the highest. So this really shows the momentum that the economy is experiencing. Capacity utilizations are improving. And this is also reflected in the recent CII CEO survey on economic outlook. And the expectation is by the end of the quarter, by the end of the year in quarter 4, capacity utilizations will be at a much higher plane, anywhere between 75 to 100% across sectors. And with the purposeful interventions that have been done in the past, whether it's the optimization of corporate income tax, better earnings, better corporate balance sheets, and better balance sheets of the financial systems, all this augur well for investment going forward. And inflation is also moderating, and that should lead to uptick in consumptions and therefore better capacity utilization going forward. The risk, of course, the only risk that we face is really that of the external sector, and to what extent it will impact. But despite that, despite the headwinds in the external sector, Indian economy continues to do well, and we at CII believe that this year the economy will grow between 6.5% to 6.7%. And just to share some data points from the CEO survey, the annual CEO survey of CII, which validates these figures and it also endorses the kind of economic growth that we are seeing. 60% of the CEOs expect GDP growth to be anywhere between 6 to 7%. 2/3 very clearly state, very emphatically state that what we are seeing today, the performance of the Indian economy being competitively superior has been determined by the lagged effect of the range of multi-dimensional reforms that have happened over the last few years, not only in the recent past, but those that have happened even pre-pandemic. And we are very optimistic. We believe that with the mantra of continuous reform, the Honorable Prime Minister has spoken about perform, reform, and transform, that we can actually go to an even higher growth trajectory of 7.7% with continued focus on reforms. And to usher in a very powerful or a new trajectory of socio-economic progress, sustainable and inclusive growth. And in this context, I would just like to touch upon a few suggestions that can help to accelerate the pace of growth. Already a lot of purposeful reforms have happened in the past, but of course it is always a journey, and that journey, as the Honorable Prime Minister also articulated in terms of reform, perform and transform. In that context, some of the suggestions I have are, some of the next generation reforms, whether it's to do with land, labor or power, are either more indexed to states or on concurrent list, and therefore an institutional mechanism to build consensus on some of this area is one area that can, one suggestion that can provide further impetus to reforms. The second area is in the context of India's aspiration for $2 trillion of exports by 2030. We at CII believe it's eminently possible, and the recent performance of exports does bring in a lot more optimism. But to build it further, I think some of the areas that will help is really fast-tracking some of the FTAs that are under discussion, whether with EU, UK, Israel, GCC, amongst others. It's also about setting up a body, a trade and investment body with overseas offices that can also be facilitative, that will help build the markets for Indian industry. And finally, one risk that is appearing is in the context of ESG slowly becoming a non-tariff issue in trade. And some of this whole thinking around ESG and the multiple ratings that have emerged are all based on a Western context and do not cognize for the Indian context or global South. So how can we create a framework that is, on one hand, it has to be harmonized because the frameworks are, lack standards and there is a lot of difference in the way it's interpreted, harmonized, and a framework that is balanced and calibrated and just to all types of economies and all sizes of companies as well. That's another area that would be very important going forward because the momentum on this is picking up. The third aspect is on green manufacturing, and government has done a lot of interventions to make India a manufacturing hub, and we are seeing the green shoots of the results in many areas. But tomorrow is going to belong to green manufacturing. So sectoral roadmaps on transformation to green, a green manufacturing together with sources of low-cost sustainable finance for the transition would go a long way in strengthening India's competitiveness. And as I'm speaking about green manufacturing, I may also add that one other facet for India to be seen also as a reliable source is also this aspect of resilience, because we have to deal with disruptions that are going to be caused by extreme weather events. Climate warming is not something, it's more on account of the manner in which energy has been consumed in the West. The emissions are generated in the West, but the consequences are being faced here, and India is amongst the high vulnerable countries. A lot of disruption is likely to happen, and we are seeing more and more happening. So how do we work on adaptation to create our infrastructure to make industries and also agri-value chains more resilient to global warming is another area that could help us strengthen competitiveness of the economy. The fifth suggestion I want to draw attention to is the area of MSMEs. That's a sector that is I would say, the lifeline of the economy, large provider of jobs, and that sector needs strengthening in as far as access to finance is concerned, as far as building competitiveness with the modern technologies of digital, and also becoming future ready as far as sustainability is concerned. So that's another area perhaps to be attended through a cluster-based approach. Agriculture is a very important sector. Nearly half of India's workforce is in agriculture. It's the most vulnerable to climate change. India has the largest arable land. There's immense potential for India to expand agriculture exports. We are just about 3% of global exports. So a mechanism to bring in greater corporate participation through a cluster-based mechanism, as was suggested in the HLEG report, is another opportunity. India's services export is doing well, and there is a lot more potential for high value added services from India, and this is something that also needs to be integrated with the FTA. So there are recognition of degrees and so on and so forth, and perhaps a integrated view on how this can be developed, because India does have the strength of the technical manpower. And in the budget, the Honorable Finance Minister also brought in thrust on tourism. That also has a lot of economic multipliers. It can create a lot of small and micro enterprises also. And progressing that on mission mode is most welcome. And we would suggest that tourism can be brought into the concurrent list, so it receives the attention from both the state and the center to take it forward. And lastly, I would also like to say that and also state that there's been a lot of work done on ease of doing business. We have seen how India's rankings have moved up. There's a lot of work being done also on decriminalization, but it's certainly a journey, and that's an area that some more work will facilitate development of economic activity, will reduce the cost of economic activity. And in the end, may I once again reiterate the optimism that we in CII, the members of CII, experience, and we very strongly believe that it's on account of a lot of the purposeful interventions that have happened. So I take this opportunity to thank the government and congratulate the government for all that they have done to make the Indian economy as competitive, to make it a shining star in the global stage. I believe that India is at the cusp of a transformation, and with the continuous thrust on reform, a purposeful reform that the government has, I think we will see a major transformation in the years ahead. Thank you very much. And with this, may I now invite, I have great pleasure in inviting Dr. Nageshwaran for his keynote address.
Mr. Sanjeev Puri, Mr. Madhav Singhania, Shri Akash Goenka, Mr. Marut Sengupta, other distinguished members of the audience. I thank the Confederation of Indian Industry for organizing this interaction with all of you, not only to share the sense of optimism and hope and the cheerful state of the economy, but also to share with you what vision and plans we have. For me personally, it is very nice to return to this city after nearly 6 years since my last visit, and to see the continuous transformation of this city and this state to become the most important locomotive or driving force for the Indian economy in the years to come. I think it is a very positive sign, and it augurs well, not only for Uttar Pradesh, but also for the entire country, to see Uttar Pradesh moving ahead with a complete socio-economic and industrial transformation, plugging itself into the growth sectors of the economy in all areas, from manufacturing to tourism to knowledge-intensive services, etc., and to do so by strengthening the physical infrastructure, etc. It is a very, very positive feeling to be able to spend even a few hours in this place of vibrance and optimism. I'm here I'm standing in front of you to share the story that the Indian economy, if I may say so, is on a state of autopilot. Okay. So what we have here is the economy is growing quite impressively after the pandemic setback in 2021. And we will share with you some information on various sectors, how they are doing. And why are we optimistic about the coming next 7 to 10 years? That is the reason why financial and corporate sector are going to be important contributors compared to the last decade, and how the government is making sure that it is facilitating economic activity and creating the conditions for good growth through commitment to fiscal health. And then everybody speaks about the UPI, QR code payments, digital transformation, etc. But in what way it is actually helping the economy to grow? And then, of course, the risk factors. Mr. Sanjeev Puri in his remarks mentioned several areas where we could act, institutional mechanisms for consultation with states, for export growth, green manufacturing, agriculture, tourism in current list, etc. But there are always going to be challenges for a country of this size, for a country of this per capita income, where we have lots to look ahead. So the unresolved issues should not be seen as problems, but as actually low-hanging fruits, which will further unlock economic growth. So all these numbers are familiar to you in the last few days, at least, after the GDP data came out. In 22-23, we achieved 7.2% growth in real terms after inflation adjustment, following 9.1% in the previous year. Of course, in the pandemic year, there was a contraction. Earlier, many people expected that financial year 23 will end with a growth of only around 6.7, 6.8%, but it is 7.2. And I can even tell you, some of you may not know that GDP data gets revised 6 times. The final number is the 6th estimate, which comes 3 years later. So the final estimate for the year ending March 23 will come in January, February 2026. When that number comes out, I am confident that the 7.2% will be even higher. That is the momentum in the economy. That is what we are witnessing, that even 7.2 will turn out to be an underestimate and not an overestimate of growth last year. The areas where the economy is growing really well is not only in terms of real GDP, but also compared to many other economies. The Indian economy in the fourth quarter, as you can see here, at 6.1%, we were the highest compared to other major economies. And on the left side, I'm showing you quarter by quarter breakdown. So we are performing well in comparison to ourselves, and we are performing well in comparison to others as well. Okay, now what are the various sectors that are doing well? Actually, almost all sectors are doing well. If you look at this, yes, industry growth rate has come down. Growth rate has come down. It is growing, but the growth rate has come down. And that is because last year we had oil price, interest rates going up. So there was a slowdown in the second and third quarter. But the services sector is growing very well. Agriculture is very stable. So all of them are growing, some faster than others, but everything is in a rising trend. Look at the export sector of services and goods. It is 23.5% of GDP, the highest in the last 8 years. Private consumption, households consumption as a share of GDP is 58.5%, highest in 16 years. This is the important thing, because what people like you and people sitting here on the dais, what they do with investment is what is going to drive employment, job creation, and income growth. And that is a good sign that it is beginning to rise now. The capital formation, investments on the ground in the economy by the private sector and the public sector is now at a 9-year high. And we believe in the rest of the 7 years in this decade, it is only going to grow towards high 30s. If you look at the private consumption, what we have is the growth rate since the pandemic has now caught up with the trend if the pandemic had not happened. So what we are seeing is that the economy started off because of the pandemic, it has come below trend, the black line. But now what you are seeing is that the black line has caught up with the red line, which is the continuation of the pre-pandemic trend. So whatever we lost in 2021, we have made up already. And this gives you all the green bars here, there are lots of numbers here. It tells you what all we track before we come to the conclusion that the economy is doing well. We are saying industry sector, services sector, foreign trade, fiscal GST collections, and how bank credit is growing. So if you look at the current financial year, 2 months have already passed, April, May. Most of the indicators are in green or yellow with respect to foreign trade, but domestic industry, domestic services, GST collections, bank credit growth, all of them are pointing towards good growth momentum in 23-24 as well. Okay. Now, what about the agricultural sector? Because we are all now looking forward to a good monsoon, but looking at food grain production compared to the last 3 years, 22-23 a slight increase. So food grains record production, combination of all this. And even if the monsoon has a slight delay, if you look at the current state of water reservoir storage compared to the last 10-year average, the reservoir levels are 36% higher than the 10-year average. In South India, in Western India, 25% higher, Central India, 22%, and so on. All India basis, we are 24% higher than the last 10-year average in terms of water availability in the reservoirs. Seed availability is pretty good in terms of quantity. Of course, we have to ensure both quality and variety, but overall seed availability is quite good for the kharif crop. And food grain procurement, wheat procurement was very strong in 22-23, so there is enough inventory to control price fluctuations. And if you look at domestic tractor sales in the last 1 year, this has picked up quite strongly compared to year-on-year growth rate. So we are growing at close to about 20% as of March 23. So overall tractor sales is well above the pre-pandemic, before the pandemic. And that means the farm sector, agriculture sector are looking forward to a year of good growth and good harvest. And fertilizer stocks are at very comfortable levels as well. Now, if I look at the industry sector, companies' purchases of raw materials and other supplies are rising, which means purchasing managers are very confident that they are taking on more inputs. The growth rate of industrial production index and the 8 core industries, you may think that the number is very low. That's because the scale is very large. It is coming from 40%. But if you look at it, it is growing at high single digits, which is the normal growth. Okay? And this is what Mr. Sanjeev Puri also mentioned in his remarks. The industry today is operating at a very high capacity utilization, which means they have to expand and go for new capacity, which will create downstream jobs and downstream investment. And that is what you see. Steel production and cement production both are rising, which means the residential and non-residential construction activity will bring workers back from rural India to urban India, and they will in turn send their income back to rural India. And that is why we feel consumption in rural India story is something that will pick up momentum in the rest of the financial year. In services sector, again, very strong growth, and railway freight traffic has been picking up very strong at 120 million tons month after month. Hotel industry, I just want to share, Mr. Sanjeev Puri is sitting here. 40 million people, 4 crore people were employed in the hospitality industry before the pandemic. During the pandemic, it came down to 2.9 crore people. 1.1 crore people lost their jobs in the hospitality industry. Today, I can just ask one of you to take a guess so that you can stay awake. What is the total number of people employed in the hospitality industry now? Any guess? So just to repeat my numbers, pre-pandemic 4 crores. During the pandemic came down to 2.9 crores. 2 years now after the pandemic, where are we? 6 is probably from 2.9 to 6 within 2 years. That's not realistic. We are now back above the pre-pandemic level, 4.5 crores. Okay? Yeah. Okay. Now, signs of recovery in rural demand. This is what I was pointing out to. So you can see here, rural demand growth of FMCG was negative in Q1, Q2, Q3, and in Q4, you can see a small positive blip, which is a good sign of a turnaround. So the construction sector activity and good monsoon will contribute to income growth in rural India, and the small blip which you see here will continue to grow in size. Because agricultural and non-agricultural wages are beginning to rise at high single digits. And you can also see here, after slight moderation in December, January, and February, you can see a pickup in 2- and 3-wheeler sales in the country. And now, after the increase in the minimum support price for crops, basically, and a rise in Manrega wage rate, this will improve the financial security of households further and boost rural demand in the coming months. As far as urban India is concerned, there is no problem, because if you look at the sale of 4-wheelers and 2-wheelers in urban India, it's very strong in the last 2 years. Housing launches are picking up. Domestic air passenger traffic is, compared to the previous 3 years, 22-23, at a very high level. Credit and debit card spending, also in terms of debit card spending, it is about 9.5 lakh crores. Credit card spending is about 3.7 lakh crores, etc. So, if you look at any parameter, the economy is in a good shape. That is why I said it's an autopilot. As a typical middle-class person who grew up in a small town like Madurai, my tendency is always to be cautious and not talk too much about how well we are doing. Because we always believe we should not tempt gods. We should not anger them. And we should be grateful for what they have given. But once in a while, it is important for the public also to know that compared to how the rest of the world is doing, like we know, for example, what is happening in the neighboring countries, in South Asia, and also even in the developed world, in comparison, we are not only doing well in comparison, but also doing well even by our own historical standards, because that will give us the confidence. So once in a while, we need to talk about certain good things we have done so that we will continue to do them, and also certain mistakes that we have not done which others have done, so that we don't repeat them also one more time. So it is important to talk about them. At the same time, the middle class person in me always wants to say, let's not talk about it too much, but let's keep doing all the right things. Okay? As far as the external trade is concerned, looking at the performance of goods exports, we slowed down because the world economy slowed down. Oil prices went up, therefore export growth did not really take off, only for goods. But if you look at the services growth, we will show you later, services exports growth is very strong. But that is where the industry also has to pay attention. Artificial intelligence can take away the need for a lot of people, Indian software exporters. It's about also, that's why we need to be very cautious whether the artificial intelligence will make a competitive threat to India's IT-enabled services growth. So we need to think ahead and plan ahead. But because of the services sector growth, the trade deficit has come down quite dramatically. And today, India's foreign trade balance, it is negative because of huge oil imports, but it is far less negative than it used to be. That is why we are showing the current account is going smaller. Foreign investors investing in Indian stock markets is rising. Services trade surplus is very high. Green bar is the surplus, blue bar is the export, and the red bar is the import. So net is a positive service. And foreign exchange reserves, we have more than 10 months of import cover. It is like having enough money in the balance to pay for imports even if no new money comes in. And then compared to other countries, India did not increase interest rates compared to other countries which increase interest rates by 5% and 6% and 7% and so on. India interest rates went up only by 2.5% in the last 1 year from the Reserve Bank of India. And India's inflation, the price increase, compared to others, our deviation from the average, from the target, is only about 2% compared to the deviation of 7 to 8% for even developed countries. So by and large, during the pandemic, other countries spent too much, cut interest rates too low. So inflation went up too much and they have to raise interest rates too much. We did not overdo the pandemic times, we did not overdo the stimulus, therefore we did not have to raise interest rates so much. So our optimism in India is, in the last 30 years, whenever Indian economy grew very strongly for 3 to 4 years, it used to run into problems. Inflation will pick up, imports will go up, the currency will become very expensive, and then we have to take some drastic action. But this time, because of the sound economic policies we have followed, because of the infrastructure we have built in the last 8 years, and because of digital transformation of the economy, it is possible now for the Indian economy to grow for a longer period, not just 3 years or 5 years, but 7 or 10 or 15 years like China did between 1979 and 2008. India can grow for a longer period without running into overheating problems. Because if you run a machinery for a long period, it tends to get overheated. That is physics, law of physics. But the speed with which we get overheated was a little too quick in the past. But this time, because of all the various good things we did in the last 8 to 9 years, we feel that the machine can run for 8 to 10 years without getting overheated, the economic machine. That is the hope that we have at the moment for the economy. And externally, in the outside world, inflation is coming down because oil prices has come down, food prices have come down. That is why the wholesale price index is now negative. Okay? And overall, the inflation rates are lower. That is why the RBI did not raise interest rates in the last 2 meetings. And compared to the inflation we had last year, 6.7% average, for this year it will be around 5%. Again, very manageable compared to our history. The reason why we are optimistic, we must thank people like them here, people like you there. We must thank you because you have done the hard work last decade. You have improved your balance sheets. You have reduced debt and your profitability is now running well. So you are now in a position to invest. So the second decade, 2011 to 2020, all of you basically spent a lot of time improving the health of your balance sheets. And today you have such a good health of profitability and balance sheet strength because you reduced your debt burden last decade, you are in a position to invest. So that is the other reason why we are optimistic compared to last decade. 2000 to 2009, excess growth. 2012 to 2020, repairing balance sheets. 2020, we were ready with good balance sheets, but then the pandemic happened. War in Ukraine happened. Interest rates went up last year, one after the other. So now, hopefully, with all these things behind us, you will now be able to start investing, and that is beginning to happen. But that is why banks are also willing to lend more now, because banks also went through a period of balance sheet repair, good non-performing ratio, bad debts have come down, capital allocations have become very strong, so banks are willing to lend, companies are willing to borrow as well. And credit growth is picking up across all sectors. Whether it is MSME sector, whether it is industry, personal services, there is good demand for credit and a good willingness to supply credit as well. And private sector, as we can see here, is investing, and we track it through multiple indicators. Is the private sector and the public sector, both of them, are they importing machinery, equipment, technology? The answer is yes. The capital goods imports growing in double digits. Capital goods index of production in India is growing. Construction infrastructure goods index production is also rising. And if you look at the investment by different sectors in the economy, excepting 3 sectors, everywhere else, the growth rate is between 20 and 60 or 70% across different sectors. Actual investments by the private sector are beginning to happen. That is why we are confident that this investment growth will result in jobs growth, will result in incomes growth across urban and rural India in the coming years. What can the government do to support this? The government should ensure that fiscal health remains stable. So the fiscal deficit has been coming down, and we continue to insist on 4.5% by 25-26, and also by improving the quality of expenditure. Instead of spending money on revenue items, the government in the last 6 years has increased investments on the ground. You see that in the airports, in the roads, in the railways, and so on. Capital expenditure is the best way for the government to support the economy because it creates more downstream expenditure as well, instead of one-time payments or tax cuts to the people. And tax revenue collection, both in the corporate income tax and personal income tax and GST collections, have been rising step by step. This is the annual average. It shows that the use of technology, reasonable tax rates, better assessment procedures, and the natural growth of the economy are also giving the government enough revenue to support social welfare expenditure for the lower income population, and also on key investment areas such as education and health as well. Okay, I spoke about the digital transformation of India. If you look at the world, everybody says India's growth rate will be at least 6%. I feel it will be closer to 6.5% and 7% for 2 reasons. One is companies are ready to invest, and number 2, the digital transformation. You and I know that even for 2 rupees and 5 rupees, you can use a QR code. You don't need to carry a wallet, you just need to carry your phone with you, with a QR code. It is your wallet and it is your communication device, your phones. And what is it doing? It is not just simply a question of convenience. It is helping even the smallest business from the remotest village to be plugged into the global economy. And therefore, they become part of the overall Indian economy, and they can now access loans because they have a footprint, they have a track record that they can show, and banks can exchange information with one another about you with your permission. So that when you apply to loan for one bank and you have accounts in multiple banks also, you don't have to keep on reproducing your documents over and over again. That is what account aggregator does. And DigiLocker helps you store all your information in one place so that you can retrieve them for whatever purpose you want. And FASTag will enable the government to track movement of goods and services. It is a pulse rate of the economic activity. And then we have credit-enabled network, Open Credit Enablement Network, OCEN, which means GST invoices can be used as a collateral to raise working capital loan, and the piloting of Open Network Digital Commerce, ONDC, is going to be an alternative to the Amazons and other e-selling platforms, that even the micro enterprise in India will now have access to the global market. So the digital transformation of India is helping to become many players who were outside the formal economy to become part of the formal economy, to be able to get loans and other financial products, and third, to grow the market for themselves. That is why the UK magazine Economist wrote 2-3 months ago that if you come to India a few years later, you will not see any more payment hawkers or payment vendors because everybody would have been formalized already. They would have become part of the formal economy. They would have become proper store rather than selling under the open sun and open rains. So that is a very positive story. And we have barely scratched the surface of the potential of digital transformation of India. And that is why when I told you a few minutes ago, this time I am more confident that the economy can grow faster for longer. It is because of these developments. In the interest of time, I mentioned about all of these indicators, ONDC, account aggregator, etc. I'm not going to spend more time on this, but these are all very, very exciting developments. Udyam is for MSME sector. E-Shram is for the informal workers to register themselves, get welfare payments. Open network, digital commerce I mentioned, and account aggregator also about sharing of information so that you get financial products. And because of all this, the labor market is beginning to improve and overall growth in the EPFO additions is also rising, which means Provident Fund new subscriptions are picking up, which means more people are entering the workforce. And lastly, I would say, as a combination of everything that I shared with you, I believe in evidence-based presentation, so I shared with you a lot of evidence. You don't have to believe my words. They were backed up by numbers, not only within the country, but in comparison to others, our prospects look good. But remember in the 1960s, a UK economist, Miss Joan Robinson, she said one thing. For every statement you make about India, the opposite is equally true. That is what she said. Which is natural because it is very difficult to compress a country of this size and this population into few words and say this is the truth. This is true, something else is also true. So whatever we have accomplished is impressive. Whatever remains to be done is also substantial. Mr. Puri in his remarks pointed to several of them. We have to make sure that we continue to maintain our overall health, physical health. During the pandemic, it came out very clearly. People with obesity and other existing illnesses were more vulnerable. Years of schooling were lost in the pandemic years. That have to be made up. Skilling is so important. Otherwise, how do we convert the demographic youth profile into a productive population? Appropriate skilling and education are a very high priority. He spoke about land reforms, and there is also the issue of making sure that our electricity generation companies run profitably and viably, and that is a state government initiative. And more importantly, energy security and climate change. 30 years ago, when China was growing, climate change was not an issue. They were not told you should shut down coal-fired power plants. You cannot create any more coal-based power plants. You have to bring down your carbon emission. These were not considerations at all. People could burn as much fuel as they wanted to and grow. Energy is critical for economic growth. But we are now being told you have to watch out and control your carbon emission. But then the historical emission by developed countries over the last 200 years is already going to have an impact. So we need to prepare for the impact we are going to receive because others already emitted. At the same time, also control our emissions going forward. It is a balancing act we have to do. Maintain economic growth and make sure that we also grow sustainably. We have to invest in technology for battery storage, for green hydrogen, mini nuclear power plants. All these things have to be part of the equation. Then, as I mentioned earlier, artificial intelligence can take away our competitive advantage in software and IT-enabled services exports. Challenges will always be there. For a country that is transitioning from $2,000 per capita income towards $5,000 to $8,000 per capita income, that is part of the story. In fact, if anything, the more we address these challenges, the more I will come back to you in front of you and say our growth rate will be 8% and not 6.5% over the next 20 years. So with those words, I am very happy and thankful to CII for giving me the opportunity to share the good story about India, what it has done so far quite well in the last 3 years in spite of the pandemic, and the kind of building blocks we have put in place over the last 9 years to ensure that we grow stronger, faster, and longer. At the same time, to reassure you that we are aware of the challenges and the agenda that we need to pursue in the coming years so that this sustains beyond 2030 all the way into Amrit Kal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Nageshwaran, for a very comprehensive, very inspiring presentation and backed by hard facts. And I think the industry, members of CII echo these sentiments very clearly. And just by way of example, may I just mention our own experience. Last year, we inaugurated 4 manufacturing facilities. 1 more is just going to happen. And we have started constructing 3 new. That is just an example to say how the economy is a reflection of how the economy is performing. And it's not just my own example. I mean, there are many in CII who have done it. As I was here, I thought I'll just share our own example. So it's happening on the ground. And what you have shared with all of us here, I think it's very rare to see so many indicators on a positive trajectory. I think I've at least I don't recollect ever seeing so many indicators in the positive trajectory. And it's even more encouraging to, hear you say that some of the areas that were mentioned and you also articulated are in fact additional opportunities that can see us go forward from where we are, and we completely agree with that. And that's why in CII we are saying that we can actually go to closer to 8%, 7.7% growth rate. There are, yes, challenges, but we are quite optimistic given the manner in which policy interventions have happened, facilitation has happened, and the industry is very much committed to work along the government to build this. We would just like to ask a few questions. Let me start with one question from my side, and then we'll have others take it. Now, I think the central government has very well managed the fiscal side of it. It's been very prudent, very clear, very transparent, and a very clear glide path is there. And there is all evidence that it's along that trajectory, perhaps even better. But as a country, this needs to be also reflected at the state level. How that is another challenge given the nature of how we are organized. So what would be your thoughts on how this could be done? And secondly, as far as CapEx is concerned, I mean, that's been a very welcome step that the government has ramped up investments in public works, physical, digital infrastructure, because it's making the economy competitive. But there is a piece also that's lying at the state level. How do we provide impetus to that? I know in the budget some resources have been allocated, but how do we provide impetus to really get that to happen?
First of all, thank you for letting us know that ITC is walking the talk in investing, and that's good news for all of us. And so as far as the state governments are concerned, you know that the last 2 years the government has provided a 50-year interest-free loan for states to undertake their own capital expenditure. And several fiscal incentives tied to structural reforms were given by the union government. So for example, if you do this when it comes to electricity metering or certain other initiatives which were long overdue, then you get additional borrowing limits, etc. But it is important to know that while state governments may not be spending as much as the union government does individually on capital expenditure, but the actual year-on-year growth in capex undertaken by states is rising at a very high single-digit rates. So delta is positive. And three, over the last 2 years, especially FY23, many state governments have been taking steps property tax collection, re-indexing property prices, new charges for transportation services, other services have been raised, our taxes have been raised. So there are some areas of concern, for example, return to old pension scheme, etc., which may have an impact 10, 20 years down the road, if not now. But simultaneously, we're also seeing some good fiscal measures. But this is how it will be in a democracy, that we get a mix of decisions that we are happy about, the mix of decisions that we are concerned about, etc. This is par for the course. But beneath the rhetoric and beneath the headline items, there is a realization that states have to make sure that their fisc is in order, and that is why many states did not draw upon the additional fiscal allowance the union government gave over and above the 3%. They did not make use of it, and their fiscal deficit for FY22 was below 3%, and FY23 is also going to be below 3% in the aggregate. So there are issues such as the health of the discoms that needs to be addressed, and there is this concern about pensions. But by and large, we do see a mix of actions other than only one-sided concern-inducing actions. And that is the way we need to keep up the dialogue and keep stressing the importance of fiscal health, and that will hopefully over time sink in and continue on that path. So I'm not a pessimist with respect to the state of the state government finances.
Thank you. So we have quite a few people who wish to ask questions. So if it's okay, I can ask two of them to ask a question together, and then you can just yeah.
So I mentioned that I have my colleague, Joint Secretary Mr. Raman Chopra from the Department of Revenue. So if there are any questions related to taxation-related matters, he is also there for you to take your questions.
Yeah, there are, as I note from here, that some questions for him also. Okay. So let me start with Mr. Ankit Gupta first, and after that, Mr. Anuj Agarwal. So if you could ask your questions.
Hello, sir. My name is Ankit, and we are an agri-inputs company called Dayal. So I share your enthusiasm. I believe everybody here from CII and otherwise share your enthusiasm in the growth of the India story. And but I wish to have a slight, query on the whole FRBM Act and the fiscal discipline which you were just talking about. We understand that since the Act's been in place since the past 2003, but how do you envisage that we can, reach the objectives in the Act while also maintaining the growth which we are trying to do?
So, yeah. Mr. Anuj.
Yeah. So, good afternoon, sir. First of all, thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. It fills us with a sense of pride being an Indian at this moment, looking at these facts and figures. So we saw in a presentation that India's share in the global value chain is rising. It's the fastest growing economy for a third consecutive year. So in light of these developments, do you think the time is ripe for a universal social security net, especially when to safeguard people from the insecurities of unemployment, especially when you see AI, machine learning, IoT impacting their livelihoods? So would just love an answer on that. Thank you so much.
So I think Anuj Agarwal's question may raise even more concerns for Ankit Gupta, who wanted to know about FRBM, and you were talking about universal social security. So I think Ankit will be even more concerned with your question. So in fact, you said, I'll start with your question. You said your presentation made you proud to be an Indian. So what happened yesterday in the morning, my family lives in Singapore, and my wife called me and said, both my children were born and raised in Singapore, and my son had gone to college in the US in Vermont State and just come back for a holiday. And he was humming this song from the film 1983. obviously he's a 2001 born child. So my wife asked him, you don't know Hindi, you don't play much cricket. And 1983 was a movie about the cricket trophy that was won well before you were born. And how are you able to relate to this song and hum this? And he said, look, nowadays, even in the US, it is very cool to be Indian. So Modi ji has made it very cool to be Indian. That's what he has told my wife, and my wife shared it with me over the phone. So I'm very glad to hear that these numbers and the presentation and the story that we have achieved makes you feel proud to be Indian. So universal social security as a concept for a growing economy may not be necessary, because the natural growth rate of the economy should provide opportunities for employment and income generation. So the support should be confined to those who are unable to participate in the economic activity and bring them up to a point where they can meaningfully engage in the economy itself. So I think India hasn't yet reached the stage where it is either a moral or an economic necessity to have a universal social security. It has to be means tested. It is both a matter of fiscal necessity, but also in terms of providing unintended messaging of personal incentive and responsibility. We have to manage all of that. Because for a developed country which doesn't have too many income generating opportunities and employment opportunities, the state may have to step in and provide the universal basic income kind of coverage. For our country, when natural economic growth should take care of many of the aspirations, it may not be necessary. We may be creating the ground for perverse incentives for people not to make their own effort in seeking such opportunities. So I think, therefore, universal social security for India is not something that should be on the agenda in the near term. Now, to come back to your question, maybe there were some other parts to your question which I will take up later. To come back to your question about FRBM, look, the overall goal of ensuring fiscal sustainability has not gone away at all, even though the mechanism for doing so might vary depending on the compulsions of the time that we go through. So 4.5% gross fiscal deficit ratio is in place. And if you saw in the slides or in the economic survey we brought out 4 months ago, primary deficit and revenue deficit have come down even faster than the gross fiscal deficit. And we also have a small scenario analysis in a box item in chapter 3 of the economic survey, where we show in the last 3 years, pandemic affected 2021, 21-22, and also the one before, 19-20. If the economy had grown at a nominal rate of 10% per annum, today the fiscal deficit and the fiscal debt numbers would be much lower. In other words, what we are trying to show is that all we need to achieve is 3 to 5 years of 10% steady nominal GDP growth. These fiscal parameters will automatically improve because our growth rate is higher than the cost of borrowing we have. And then if you compare from 2005 until now, India's gross debt was 81% of GDP in 2005. Now it is 84%, a 3% slippage. Only 2 other countries have done better than India, Indonesia and Germany, with a 2% slippage in the overall debt to GDP ratio. Many other countries in the G20 and beyond have seen a slippage in their debt ratio by order of magnitude of 40 to 80 percentage points. So for all the hand-wringing about our fiscal parameters, we haven't slipped at all much. We are at least held steady, and we are a country which has a potential to grow in nominal terms at between 10 and 11%. All that being said, I will also concede that we are a BBB minus. Even a country like the Philippines, which is much smaller than us, has a BBB plus credit rating. And that means if you go from BBB minus to BBB plus, your government's cost of borrowing will come down by 100 basis points. And that is a fiscal stimulus. So good fiscal health on our part is a good fiscal stimulus to all of you, because interest rates will come down. So we are aware of that and we are working towards it. Asset monetization should help. Natural economic growth should help. So there is no, what shall I say, there is no second opinion on the importance of keeping at it and achieving these numbers and getting to a credit rating, better credit rating, because it is not just a question of prestige. It's a question of actually putting more money in the hands of people through lower interest rates. So we are at it.
Mr. Rajiv Sharma has a question for Mr. Raman Chopra, and Mr. Vatsal Dalmia has a question for Dr. Nageshwaran. So I will now ask first Rajiv and then Vatsal to come.
Sir, I'm Rajiv Sharma, Chartered Accountant. So as per the new TCS provisions, the usage of international credit cards towards expenses on visit outside India are subject to 20% TCS. And the ministry has clarified that business visit of the employees and all will be exempt on these cards. So, sir, how do you, does the government plan, because this confusion, how do you distinguish the two for a corporate employee between the personal visits and this? So do you plan to bring some FOQ or something on that?
The change was brought about in the 1st of February budget, and post that there have been subsequent delegated legislations corresponding to the TDS legislation. The TCS legislation has not yet kicked in. It kicks in on 1st of July. There has been a lot of discussion. Sir has also been a part of that discussion, the Finance Secretary, the Revenue Secretary, the Finance Minister. Everybody is aware of this issue. And we are certainly going to come up with some clarifications and FAQs on that. And that will clarify the position beyond any reasonable doubt on what and how and in what manner TCS is to be collected, and to what extent the threshold is available on which it is not to be collected. That is going to be clarified and will be soon clarified. That is what I can assure you. At this point of time, I cannot share with you that what is to be clarified, to what extent it will be clarified, but it shall be clarified. That's all I can share.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Vatsal Dalmia. I am from Kanpur. I'm a chartered accountant and an entrepreneur. As you were talking about the economic survey, you had highlighted in this year's economic survey that the lagged impact of structural reforms in the last decade had sprinted India's growth, economic growth, into a high trajectory. So what do you think are the key next impact structural reforms in the coming decade that will impact India's economic growth?
What did you say? Last part of it, so? These structural reforms.
Yeah, structural reforms.
Okay. Okay. So the reforms that we have done between 2015 and 2020, I had also mentioned in the survey, was somewhat similar to what happened between 1998 and 2002. And in that period, we went through several one-off shocks. The sanctions following nuclear blast, 9/11, technology boom ending, 2 droughts, etc. All those things delayed the impact of the reforms, which then played out from 2004 onwards when global conditions also turned favorable. Similarly, things we have done between 2015 or 16 until now, the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Reform, GST, Infrastructure, Real Estate Regulation Act, and many of the ease of doing business reforms, everything were overshadowed by the balance sheet problems we talked about. And then once the balance sheet problems got fixed, you got the pandemic for 2 years. And then last year, commodity prices went up very sharply. Interest rates went up very sharply globally. So these are like passing clouds which keep coming one after the other, preventing the sun from shining through. But once they're out of the way, then you are going to see the impact of the reforms coming into the GDP growth numbers. So what will then carry it forward even further is some of the things I highlighted in my closing remarks. Addressing skilling and education issues. Many of the other reforms areas, and as Mr. Puri also mentioned, are in the state and the union government list. Whether it is in power sector, whether it is in land reforms, and in issues like conversion of agricultural to non-agricultural land, the process of doing so. All these reforms, if we are able to achieve for the next 10 years or so, then that will further keep the growth momentum going from 6.5 to 7 or 7.5%. And at some point when the world economy also settles down, the current state of polarization also passes, then we can go back to even growth rates of 8% or so. But that I will not talk about it now. So right now, between now and 2030, based on what we have done so far, without even assuming further reforms will be done, I can say we have the potential to grow steadily between 6.5 and 7%. If we add additional reforms I talked about, we will go from 7 to 7.5, or maybe possibly even 8. But those things will have to be if we do it, then we will get there. So I don't want to count the chickens before they are hatched.
We have Mr. Aman Agarwal, who has a question for Mr. Chopra, and Mr. Madhav Singhania also has a question for Chief Economic Advisor. Yeah. So you want to start in the meantime? Sure, sure.
So, sir, firstly, very happy to hear about the initiative on fiscal prudence of states and something you mentioned. My question is more around energy. And energy is going to be something very important going forward as well. There was one sector which you showed which has degrown 2022-23, which was electricity. So, and today we're still very low on the per capita consumption of electricity, which is bound to go up. And what started to happen during the summer months is there's restricted usage of electricity. Everyone's praying for monsoon. So is there something which the government is working out for a smooth energy transition to make sure that, while this happens, there's no dearth of power? And secondly, a lot of the freebies coming along on electricity are leading to tariff increases in states which are giving them. So that ends up impacting competitiveness. So how do you look at that?
I mean, the second point is a fair one, and that is something that's an ongoing political economy exercise of making sure that the burden of freebies doesn't disproportionately fall on one segment of the economy to their detriment, because eventually it affects the overall competitiveness. So therefore, it's a question of continuously engaging with them and persuading them that if you have a long enough horizon with these policies, there are no winners. Okay, that is the way to go forward, and that is an ongoing exercise. Now, on the first question, what are we doing to provide for energy security, etc.? I mean, for example, this year we have ensured that adequate coal availability is there, and the mix between, and even we have drawn up the plans for what kind of energy composition and installed capacity will emerge between now and 2030, based on both peak and off-peak demand analysis, etc. And we are providing for both fossil non-fossil fuel-based energy generation. And then if you look at the budget this year, there is plenty of incentives and for storage, battery storage, and for investment in green hydrogen, etc. So both in the immediate space of ensuring that peak demand is managed during summer months, and also for the medium term, the government has come up with several measures, and that is why I think we don't see the kind of outages that we used to see on an endemic basis in the past. So there are pockets of demand management issues that arise from time to time, but there is no severe energy bottleneck at this point. That is partly because of the conscious advanced planning with respect to peak load management. And also, we are very conscious of the fact that we need to have autonomy and freedom of space in planning for our energy mix. We cannot be driven entirely by emission considerations, because we need to provide for energy needs of a growing economy. So we are very conscious of that. And recently the Central Electricity Authority, which also has an acronym CEA, came up with the plans for installed power generation until 2030. So we are providing for the kind of energy requirement that this country would need for its growth.
Hello. My question is related to TDS framework. Currently, there are 31 sections dealing with different types of payments to residents, where the TDS rates vary from 0.1% to 30%. In some sections, there are varying rates of TDS depending upon the status of payees and different natures of payments. The blockage of funds in TDS to be received back as refunds results in loss of business opportunities for the industry and increase in borrowing cost. There is also avoidable cost involved for the government in terms of interest under section 244A of 6% per annum. All the TDS information is getting captured in the directives 26AS and AIS of the direct. Thus, it is easier for the government to collect the balance checks after deducting the TDS and TCS from the resident taxpayers. Given the above complexities, there are also a fertile ground for litigations. Is there a plan to lay down a roadmap for reducing the disparity in TDS rates and provide for a simple domestic TDS framework?
TDS, originally when the Tax Act came up, it was very limited and it was actually not there. As we moved through, the concept came through that as you earn, you pay. गवर्नमेंट ने भी खर्चा सारा साल करना है, उसको भी टैक्स कलेक्शन सारा साल करनी है. टीडीएस की कलेक्शन मंथ वाइज होती है. टीडीएस और एडवांस टैक्स की कलेक्शन या सेल्फ असेसमेंट की कलेक्शन में सिर्फ इतना फ़र्क है कि टीडीएस का सोर्स ऑफ रेवेन्यू इज़ अ कॉन्टिन्यूस सोर्स ऑफ रेवेन्यू फॉर द गवर्नमेंट. And once the government has to spend on a continuous basis, it needs to collect on a continuous basis. That is the basis of TDS. जहाँ तक रेट्स का सवाल है, चूंकि हर पेमेंट में इनकम का कंपोनेंट अलग होता है, इसलिए उस रेट का अलग रेट होना भी मैंडेटरी है और अच्छा है. That is why all along throughout the sections we have tried to estimate what is the income component in a particular payment which is being received by you, and on the basis of that payment only the TDS rate is fixed. You are saying that it is over deducted sometimes and it results in a refund and government has to pay interest. Agreed. There are specific provisions which empower you to seek a lower deduction certificate. So government has factored that itself in the legislation. So अगर broad perspective में देखें, TDS is a very positive thing कि आपकी भी tax liability at the time of payment charge हो गई, गवर्नमेंट के पास भी रेवेन्यू आ गया. और अगर करेक्ट रेवेन्यू की आप बात करते हैं, मैं एक रेट सबके लिए ऐसा रेट नहीं फिक्स कर सकता कि जो सबकी इनकम्स पे अप्लाई हो जाए और सबका टैक्स उतना ही कटे जितना कटना चाहिए था. ऐसा फिजिकली पॉसिबल नहीं. We keep on iterating the rates, keep on modifying them, reducing them, increasing them, depending upon the request received from the stakeholders also. We keep on identifying new activities, new gaming पर हमने change किया इस बार. If in fact you see the gaming industry, the entire rate structure on gaming industry has been changed in this year. Crypto पर हम last year लाए. So many other things we have been keeping on imposing rates and rationalizing them. So TDS is a long drawn learning process for us also, and we keep on modifying it depending on the sensitivity which is conveyed to us by the stakeholders. That is how it flows. I don't think it needs a very radical reform, though it needs some rationalization, but rationalization is continuously happening. Thanks.
Time, so we'll just take 2 more questions. I know there are many who wish to ask, but those who have requested earlier, I'll have to call them. Mr. Gaurav Latu, he has a question for Dr. Nageshwaran, and Mr. Devanshi Gupta, he has a question for Mr. Raman Chopra. So,
components for the Indian Railways, and we also supply a lot of things for the oil companies. Everything which you said is absolutely true, sir, and we're experiencing it every day. We have set up 3 new factories in the past 18 months, and this year our entire company's focus was look west. And the kind of response we're getting from all the countries and clients abroad, it's phenomenal. Everybody wants to be having an Indian supplier or a design house in India. So yes, I think the future belongs to India as well as to all the entrepreneurs who's contributing to that. So the question which I wanted to ask is that currently India is under the presidency, under India's G20 presidency. I think there's a growing need to strengthen and improve the international financial architecture and the MDBs or the multilateral development banks. So what is the take of the Brenton twins, the IMF and World Bank, on this cause, and how are they contributing to it?
So first of all, thank you for backing up what we believe with your own personal story of investor interest in India. That's reassuring. Thank you. Now, you know that under the Indian G20 presidency, which is going to conclude in November, end of November, we have appointed an independent expert group under the co-convenership of Mr. N.K. Singh, who was a former finance ministry official and chairman of the 15th Finance Commission, and he is a co-convener together with Mr. Larry Summers of the former US Treasury Secretary. So this committee will come out with a two-part report on how we can repurpose the multilateral development banks, not just the World Bank, but also other multilateral development banks, so that they are able to continue to lend for their main purpose, development, poverty alleviation, etc., but also provide for resources for handling energy transition, climate change, also for possible future pandemics, etc. How do they make sure that their balance sheets are efficiently utilized? How they can streamline their operations to extract more savings out of it? And how shareholders can otherwise contribute? And do they also need the kind of credit rating that they have today? Can they readjust such a way that more loanable resource can be freed up? All these issues are part of the mandate of this committee. It will come out with one part of its report before July meeting of the finance ministers and central bank governors. It will come out with the second part before the October meeting happens in Marrakesh. So there is a reform of the multilateral development banking system in the world is a very important priority for Indian G20 presidency, and we expect that this committee will come out with such a good report that it will win the support of the other G20 members, and which can then pave the way forward for more public resources to be made available for tackling not only individual country growth challenges, but also these global commons, such as climate and health, etc.
So we have one last question from Ms. Devanshi Gupta.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Devanshi Gupta, Chartered Accountant. My question is for Mr. Raman. Sir, as we note that advanced pricing agreement has become a preferred alternative for dispute resolution mechanism, and also the program has received an overwhelming response. However, the officer strength is not increasing in proportion to the number of cases being filed, thereby leading to a huge pendency of cases. So currently, almost there are around over 750 cases being, pending. So my question is whether the government is considering an increase in or a capacity building by increasing the officer strength by recruiting knowledgeable, skillful, and expert level officers to resolve the pendency, and also ensuring a stability of tenure for them.
Advanced pricing arrangement is an excellent alternate dispute management scheme if you see it in that manner, because there I come to you beforehand only and say that what is the pricing arrangement of this, so that I do not end up in litigation later. When it came up about 6 years back, the scheme was highly appreciated and many takers took the scheme. At that time we had a very skeletal officer strength of only having one CIT APA in the whole country. After that, it has gradually increased, and presently also we are aware that there is a pendency, but the disposal rate is also substantially higher than earlier years. If you see that APA, it will come out in the International Tax Bulletin as soon as it is published. You will see that there has been a phenomenal increase in disposal of APAs in the last year. So we are expecting, we are putting more people, we are giving them better tenures in APS, and we expect the disposal rates to match the filing rates sooner or later. So that way the pendency will not remain and it will be a smooth process of APS. We are also promoting APS from all ends from our side also. Thank you.
So I know there are a lot of questions, but we have run out of time. So I'll make the following suggestion that all the questions could be mailed to CII, and we will facilitate a. No, so I would recommend. I would recommend that you send the question. We will do it because we are running out of time, and there are many people who are, asking for. Okay, good. Last question. We won't allow. Okay, go on. You've been very persuasive.
Well, I'm from. Sir, it is about Mr. Chopra, of course. It's about the income tax faceless assessment. Now, you've done it with many considerations. It is not suiting some, so it's fine. I mean, it's a very major decision. But when it comes to appeal, it is causing difficulties. Now, at the first level of appeal, it is faceless. From tribunal, it becomes offline. Now, that is where the confusion is coming, because very important cases with thousands of, there are certain cases, including one of ours, where there are about 1,000 pages. Now, the gentleman, whoever will do it, I've got friends, I asked 1 or 2 income tax joint commissioners, they say it becomes very difficult to address so many pages on computer. So they also feel that from appeal stage, it should be faceless. But then there is also a news that the tribunal also may become faceless. So please, if my request to you is, not from my point of view, please consult your senior, junior colleagues in income tax, people who deal with these problems, and make the first appeal also faceless. Faceless, the first appeal also. No, sorry, first appeal also offline. बहुत issues आ रहे हैं इसमें.
Fortunately, it is not a question. It is a comment on the faceless system. Faceless system has come from 21 onwards, and it is a prime thrust area of the government, and it has seen a good adoption by the assessee community fundamentally. You are suggesting that we should take inputs from our own officers. I myself was a Commissioner of Appeals faceless before joining as Joint Secretary. So in 21, the first appeal schemes came up. After that, we have modified that scheme, specifically dependent upon the issue that a video hearing is now mandatorily required to be granted. First appeal also. First appeal, we changed the original scheme. In fact, it came from our desk only, that keeping in view these feedbacks only, that earlier there was a position where approval for grant of video hearing was to be granted by somebody else. If you seek a video hearing from me, then I have to seek his approval, Chief Commissioner's approval to grant you video hearing. This was done away in the scheme, in the amendment scheme, and now you can very well ask for a video hearing and take a video hearing from me. So principally, the concept of faceless is that there is a curtain when I am issuing you notices and when you are giving me replies. There is a curtain of NFAC. If you want a video hearing, that is available. So there are, presently in this financial year, we've seen a lot of progress in the appellate stage of faceless. It has become much more smoother from the officer end also, from the assessee's end also. Still, if there are difficulties, they'll be kept on being hammered down at us, and we will be naturally modifying the procedures. They're all dynamic. As I earlier said for TCS, TDS also, tax policy is always dynamic. Faceless is a step function which will again become dynamic and improve accordingly as we move through.
So thank you, Dr. Nageshwaran, and thank you, Mr. Chopra, for the very comprehensive and detailed responses and being very patient with all the questions despite overshooting the time. And I will now hand over to Mr. Akash Goenka.
Good afternoon, everybody. Mr. V. Ananta Nageshwaran, Chief Economic Advisor, Government of India. Mr. Raman Chopra, Joint Secretary, CBDT, Ministry of Finance. Mr. Sanjeev Puri, President Designate CII and Chairman and Managing Director, ITC Limited. Mr. Madhav Singhania, Deputy Chairman, CII Northern Region and Joint Managing Director, JK Siemens Limited. Members of the media, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. We have come to the closure of an extremely enriching and stimulating session on Mission $9 trillion Indian economy by 2030. I would like to thank all the speakers for an extremely stimulating and informative discussion. We are especially thankful to Dr. Nageshwaran, CEA, Government of India, for having spared his valuable time to be with us today. Sir, as we were passing by through the presentation, as rightly said by Anuj, there was a sense of pride sitting there and listening to all those encouraging numbers, especially when you said the employment in the hospitality sector pre-pandemic was 4 crores and came down to 2.9, and again it's 4.5. So that is absolutely overwhelming, because during COVID, I think the industry which got its worst side, the worst part of the industry was seen by the hospitality. And if in hospitality sector it's a comeback with a thrust, then I'm sure that Indian economy is here only to rise. Along with that, I have a very great takeaway today, sir, that was said by your son, that in US it's cool to be Indian. So I would say now, sir, as part of Uttar Pradesh, it's cool to be from Uttar Pradesh in the country today. Also, as rightly said by Mr. Sanjeev Puri, there has been a remarkable turnaround in India's economic performance relative to the rest of the world. This is also borne out from the recent GDP print, which has shown resilient growth despite global turmoil. The government has no doubt been taking several initiatives to create an enabling environment for facilitating growth, but definitely much more is required. We look forward to a definite game-changing and actionable interventions which would de-bottleneck the economy and help in realizing our growth potentials. With these thoughts, sir, let me once again thank you for the very useful insights on the issues and ideas on taking India to a better future. May I, on behalf of CII, express our warm appreciation to you for sharing your views in such an articulate and lucid manner. Thank you once again.
demands we have made, I hope they will not be required. Our last question for you, digital payments basically it is giving people an opportunity to put things in practice, which will enable them to get financial access. That is all total. Thank you so much. Those were only for in FY23, there was small decline, but overall real estate sector is actually now beginning to see a pickup. I showed you the steel and cement prices, which was rising. So therefore, and also if you look at the RBI data on how real estate prices are rising, the construction sector I think is going to pick up very strongly. These are matters of detail and depending on the specific project, which is the most appropriate mode of risk sharing and funding, that will be allowed. देश को 5 ट्रिलियन की अर्थव्यवस्था बनाने की बात करें, यूपी को $1 ट्रिलियन की अर्थव्यवस्था बनाने की बात करें, वहाँ केंद्र सरकार के मुख्य आर्थिक सर आपने कहा कि यूपी आने वाले समय में भारत का ग्रोथ इंजन बनेगा। अभी अगर बात करें तो $1 ट्रिलियन की बात यूपी की हो रही है, देश के लिए 5 ट्रिलियन की बात, ये कितना वक्त इसमें लग सकता है?